Hello, it is just after 4 o'clock, so I'm going to call this meeting to order. And I will start by saying that the City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council, standing, or advisory committee meetings and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility at london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. It got quiet really fast there. So first I'll look to committee to see if there are any disclosures of pecuniary interest. And I'm seeing none. So we will move on to the consent items. I have a request to pull item 2.8. Any other consent items that committee would like pulled? Councillor Lewis.
I think for the sake of process, Madam Chair, I'll also ask to pull 2.9 so that we can deal with that separately. And just because I'm sure that there are some members of the public who are interested in that, and so that they're clear on what the next steps are.
Perfect. And if there is nothing else, I myself am going to pull 2.10. Okay, with that, I need a motion to move the remaining consent items. So all items except for 2.8 through to 2.10, moved by Councillor Hillier, seconded by Councillor Lewis. Any comments or questions on those consents? Go ahead, Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to staff. I just wanted to ask if there was any comment that they would like to share with us with regard to the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, the community culture and recreations piece. I'm very excited to see this. I know that staff have done a lot of work to pull this together very quickly. I know that there's some projects here that are pretty much ready to go if we get the funding approval, and I just wondered if they might want to provide us a quick little overview of that.
Certainly, and through the chair, I just want to publicly thank the team that put this list together and did the application so quickly. Certainly for the Southeast, we were within the first 24 hours of the portal opening to submit, so hopefully that means we were first in Ontario to submit, and then followed on very quickly with the remaining submissions. So a real Team London effort to do that work. What we've tried to provide here are a list of ready projects. We are ready to go with these. We've tried to indicate that clearly in the application process, and also a variety of projects meeting a variety of needs across the city, highlighting for both levels of government that these are meeting unmet needs. They are dealing, will result in more efficient, updated, modernized facilities, which I think ticks many of the boxes, if not all of the boxes, of what the application process is looking for. So those are the things that I would highlight. There are two streams which we've tried to note for you. The first stream is the multi-purpose category, and the second is on renovation and rehabilitation. I would also note that this is the first window only. In 2021, the second window will open up, and we will be equally as ready to submit at that time. I don't know if my colleague, Mr. Stafford, wishes to add anything.
Hard to follow that eloquent display of what we're doing there. So thank you. It was a mad rush, and but we wanted to show our enthusiasm and show that we're ready. And as Ms. Livingston pointed out, there are many areas in the city that are prepared and ready to go for these types of projects, and we've been very successful in the past and hope to be successful again. So we're excited about this and looking forward to moving ahead with this. And again, we'll be working toward the projects to be submitted in 2021 as well. So thank you.
So just a quick follow-up to that, and I know that there are people in, certainly in my hockey circles, who will be very excited by the Southeast Community Centre moving forward, and I'm sure that residents in Ward 14, Councillor Hillier, will have some very satisfied constituents as well. I did want to also say I really appreciate the fact that these projects are spread out really across all geographic areas of the city. Something that I know we all frequently hear concerns about, oh, it's all here or it's all there, and these are well spread out. And certainly I guess maybe with a little bit of my tourism hat on, I'm glad to see some renovations to Labatt Park as well, because I think that there's an opportunity for us to highlight that gem of a baseball field that we have in our community here. My question through you, Madam Chair, to staff is, I did see the Silverwoods Arena and Park right there on the top of the rehabilitation list. There'd been some discussion over the years about whether or not that arena was going to remain in service, and I see in the description that you know, upgrades to the current dressing rooms to make them accessible is something there. So are we looking at keeping Silverwoods on the active arena list for the foreseeable future?
Through the chair, the project right now will move forward with public consultation in the fall. We do believe that there's either, at this point in time, it's a closure of Silverwoods Arena as far as the ice goes. That's what the Bostwick Center was designed for, to replace the Glencairn and Silverwoods ice. The plant is still in effect. It's an open community process. Our anticipation at this time is a dry pad use. It's currently in dry pad use for things like roller hockey, roller derby, things like that. So we anticipate there is a need in the city. There's currently a need, and those uses are being met there, along with the other projects that you see on the list there to create the whole park campus there, actually. So, but there will be community engagement there. There's things to deal with, like a pool, and some of the other items that we talk about there. But either way, whether it's dry pad or ice pad, the dressing rooms are something that need to be addressed as well. So.
Anyone else? Councillor Pelosa.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to staff. Just, I think, verbiage that needs to be cleaned up on page 83 in regards to the accessible vehicle. Item A is that the report be requested. I just believe it should say received, so if we could just fix that before voting on it.
I've been informed that that has been done. Anybody else? Nope. I just want to thank staff also for all of their hard work, but especially for the submissions for the funding for the community culture stream, community culture and recreation stream funding. And I wanted to highlight that on page 92 of the added agenda, there's a slightly different chart, and the asks or the total project costs are all the same. It's just there's the staff have followed the guidelines for the funding stream, and the ask is consistent down the line of the 26.7%, which is what municipalities, the minimum that municipalities must contribute to these projects. So it's slightly different breakdown from the original agenda, but it's very clear on the added agenda, and just wanted to point that out. So with that, we can vote on those consent items.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Okay, so that brings us to item number 2.8, the naming of the new East Community Center at 1731 Churchill Avenue, and Councillor Lewis, you pulled that one.
I did, Madam Chair, and thank you. It's an opportunity, first of all, to thank both Ms. Livingston and Mr. Stafford for all the work that's gone into, and I know it's not just the two of them, that there's a whole team that's been working on this community center for many years, and the community engagement has been going on for many years. I wanted to pull this and discuss it a little bit because I had the chance, after the agendas were made public last week, to do a little community engagement myself. Over the weekend, I was at some hockey rinks for a few hours. That's not a surprise to anyone. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to be at the Lord Nelson Home and School Association and the Argyle Community Association meetings. It was a busy day yesterday, but I can tell you that the proposed name, the Community Center on Wavell, landed with a little bit of a thud. The community is very much interested in seeing this open and getting a name in place, but they didn't feel very inspired. And I heard some comments about the fact that, you know, the actual address is on Church Hill. We're calling it being on Wavell, and while it is on Wavell as well, it's, the address is Church Hill. I will share that a bright mind pointed out that the acronym would be COW, and they weren't sure that we wanted to have a community center that got shortened to that short form. So I just had chats with folks, and there was some suggestions from them. Certainly the one that I heard most frequently was, why can't we just call it the Argyle Community Center? And I shared the concern that was outlined in the report about the confusion between the Argyle Arena and the Argyle Community Center that could potentially cause. So there was a suggestion from them that, well, maybe we rename the Argyle Arena. There's a lot of interest in the community to really emphasize the Argyle brand, to get away from being referred to as East London and being referred to as the Argyle neighborhood. The BIA has put in some painted crosswalks. They're in the midst of getting pole wraps that identify us as Argyle on traffic signal poles. So there was some interest in that. I also had people suggest, well, why don't we just call it the East Lyons Community Center? Everybody knows where East Lyons Park is. Let's stay consistent with that name. I will tell you, we spent about 20 minutes last night at the Argyle Community Association meeting at the end, just batting around ideas, and we also didn't come up with anything that was wonderful or inspiring. I'm the first to say there were no light bulbs that went on that went, aha, this is the name for it. So I just wonder, as we move forward, how we can engage the community in bringing forward some of these alternate names that they feel might be an option. I know that we want to have a public input on this, so through you, I guess, to Ms. Livingston or to Mr. Stafford, whoever wants to field this one, how can we proceed with a public engagement that will let the public add some names to the mix and see what we come up with?
Through the chair, well, certainly through the PPM, anyone can bring forward a name, and I think what we can do is assist through our channels and through my new area of communications, social media, encouraging people to submit through that process. We're recommending that there be a PPM on the name, so perhaps that's the best vehicle to direct it to, because then there's a set meeting to discuss it. And if we can, I'll work with Ms. McCaig, and we can kind of direct people into that process and the ideas through that process. Then council will have it all at the same meeting.
So just a quick comment in follow-up to that, and I hope this was received without any feelings of personal attachment to the community center on Wavell. I really like hearing that, do some engagement through social media. There was a lot of comment last night, hey, let's engage the kids, let's see what they come up with, and be excited to see what the young people who we really want to see using this center come up with for a name for it too. So whatever we can do moving forward to do that engagement, I certainly support that, and you know, by all means, extend my offer to staff to help in any way I can to get the public engagement on that, so we get a name that the community can be proud and happy with.
Mr. Mayor.
Thanks very much. I'd like to support the notion of taking this through with PPM and taking direction accordingly. And in support of what Councillor Lewis is saying, I might add, you suggested, Councillor, how you might be able to help, and I'm suggesting that if we do have some form of contest, as it were, where a name is selected, maybe the lucky winner could have lunch with you and 1 hour free skating at Argyle Arena. And I just throw that out for your thoughts. PPM is a great idea. Thank you.
Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, because I don't want to engage in cross debate with the mayor, but perhaps the mayor would sweeten the pot by offering to join us for lunch. And just for his worship's information, I'm already looking at hosting another Family Day community skate in the ward, so perhaps we can dovetail those things together. But I'm challenging you to come to lunch with us out in Ward 2.
Anyone else? So I have a question to staff. will the address always be Churchill? I had heard that there is some possibility that the actual address of the place might be something different.
Through the chair, certainly that caught our eye as well. So we've investigated whether that's an opportunity to have the address as Wayval instead of Churchill, but I'm not sure we are with that process yet, but we'll investigate that as well.
And where will the front actual entrance be? Because I understand it fronts on 3 streets, sort of, or it touches 3 streets. Which street will the main entrance be on?
Through the chair, it's a bit of a walk-through main entrance, so it's an interesting question, but it's really 2 main entrances there, so it's a challenge to say which is the main entrance. There's a parking lot that would have an entrance off of it as well as an entrance off of Wayval, so it's an interesting opportunity there of a flow-through, so not a straight answer, I'm afraid.
Thanks. Any other questions or, okay, can I have a mover on, we have a staff recommendation to direct civic administration to basically hold a PPM, and it's moved by the mayor and seconded by Councillor Lewis, and we can vote on that.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Perfect. Item number 2.9 is tow truck solicitation at accident scenes, and Councillor Lewis, you pulled that as well, so go ahead.
I did, Madam Chair, and we do have a request for delegation status on this one from Mr. Williams, but the staff recommendation on that's before us today is to move this to the next step, which would be a PPM, where you can do that public presentation at that point. So I'd like to start by moving a referral to the request for delegation status to the public participation meeting.
Do we have? We could put that as a part B of the staff recommendation. So the staff recommendation is that this part C, this report be received, and part B is that civic administration prepare an amendment to the business licensing bylaw and hold a public participation meeting, again, back at this committee. So part C would be to refer that delegation request to the public participation meeting. Moved by Councillor Lewis. Is there a second? Councillor Hillier. Any comments? Go ahead, Councillor Lewis.
So just briefly, Madam Chair, through you to staff, and perhaps Mr. Katolik might be the appropriate person to address this, because I know that there are people in the audience who are here interested in this topic. Mr. Katolik, if he could just maybe provide us with a quick overview of where we've gone so far with this and what the next step is.
Sure. Through the chair, we were asked to consult with the industry with respect to the issue of aggressive tow truck solicitation at accident sites, and also to consult with first responders. We did so. I want to make it very clear that the direction from council was not to look at the tendered police contract with accident scenes. We have no jurisdiction with respect to that tendered contract. That would be something that police administration and the Police Services Board would deal with. So we met with first responders, and they indicated that yes, this is a problem at accident scenes. Accident scenes are stressful. There's trauma, there's personal injury, there's vehicle damage. Depending on the size of the accident, there's a lot of first responders at the accident scene. And the last thing that first responders really want to see is aggressive tow truck solicitation. We also met with the industry, and obviously there's mixed feelings from the industry. Some feel that there should be separation distances at accident scenes with tow trucks. Others feel that that regulation will not fix the issue. We also consulted with the Canadian Automobile Association, with their government relations staff. They indicated that there's 17 municipalities in Ontario that have anti-solicitation distance separations specifically to address aggressive tow truck solicitation at accident scenes. And they feel that these bylaws do address consumer protection at these accident scenes. So we're recommending a future PPM. We'll hold that in Q4 this year or Q1 next year. And at that point, we will have numerous first responders present and for sure, a lot of industry comments with respect to a proposed bylaw.
Anyone else? No? Okay. It's been moved and seconded, so we can call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
So for people that came for this, what we just did is directed staff to go ahead and prepare a draft business licensing bylaw. And in the future, there will be a public participation meeting where any member of the public can come and speak at those microphones for a maximum of 5 minutes and address this committee. So we now wait for city staff to come back, and there will be public notices of when that public participation meeting will take place. Thank you. And we can move along now to item 2.10, which I pulled. I wonder first, going to committee, if there are any questions or comments about this item from the committee. So if there's no objections, I just want to ask a question from the chair. So this was timely for me because an issue came up in Ward 5, and then I heard anecdotally that it's not just isolated to this one incident in Ward 5. So I have a few questions about when people do get these swimming pool fence permits. Do we require people to get a permit when they actually put in a swimming pool?
Through the chair, no, the permit is for the pool fence and not for the construction or installation of the swimming pool.
So, so when a subdivision is built, for example, what happens? We do a lot of inspections, do we not, with regard to the grading and the drainage on the individual lots? Can you explain that a little bit for committee?
Through the chair, as a subdivision is developed, the lot grading plans are approved. But what we're finding, and this isn't just in one specific area of the city, it's in all developing areas of the city, is as individuals, new owners purchase houses, or original homeowners put in pools, if you get a lot of pools put in a specific area, it could affect the drainage in that general area. So we are getting an increase in complaints. Those complaints are dealt with as a civil matter between neighbors. So we are having an uptick in those types of complaints, and that's the advice we give to the citizens.
So if somebody calls, so the grading has been sort of monitored and approved by the city, and then at some future point, it could be pretty immediate after the subdivision is built. At some point, somebody might put in a pool, and that completely changes the drainage from one neighbor over to the other. Is that correct?
Through the chair, it's not so much persons putting in a pool affecting the swales between the property lines. It's the infiltration. So the whole backyard was pretty well grass and, full infiltration of water. And then all of a sudden you put the pool in, you put the deck, you put the concrete. So then you have very little infiltration. And if you get a lot of neighbors putting in pools in and around the same time, and then one or two neighbors that don't, then a lot of the water will flow into that neighborhood through infiltration.
So, Mr. Katolik, do you think that so this report here is a receive? I'm wondering, based on what I've heard from my constituents, would there be any value in getting a report from staff on the extent of this, and if there's anything any kind of remedy rather than just telling people, sorry, you're on your own. If that's what you think we should continue to do, deal with it in civil court, or if there is some way that the city could remedy this situation.
Through the chair, I think it would be valuable to have some discussions with the Home Builders Association. We meet with them regularly on neighborhood construction and development issues. And also, we're going to be meeting with the Pool and Spa Association of Ontario. And for sure, this isn't a London problem. I'm sure it's a problem throughout Ontario. So we'd be happy to report back on that.
So committee, the staff recommendation is to receive. I would like to see a B, to have a report back on this lot grading program and with pools causing drainage issues. I'm not sure how to word it. I'm sure Mr. Katolik will give us some wording for the report back. But I'm just looking at committee, if anybody's interested in moving that as part of the report. If not, I'm happy to cede the chair to the vice chair, and I would move that. But it's, I'm looking for a report back again. If somebody, Councillor Pelosi, yeah, you want to move that? How would you recommend this report back be worded?
Through the chair, I'd recommend wording something similar to, as a C, report back on drainage issues associated with swimming pools in rear yards.
So A would be receive, B would be report back. Councillor Pelosi is moving that. Is there a second? Councillor Lewis is seconding that. Any comments, questions? Councillor Lewis?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to actually express thanks to you for bringing this extra component forward. I know from my time on Committee of Adjustment that there can be some real significant neighborhood disputes when drainage issues change, and when we have done an approved plan of subdivision and then something that a homeowner does changes how drainage flows in those neighborhoods. It's a concern not just to the immediate property owners, but certainly can sometimes impact our municipal infrastructure as well. So I think adding that component in is a good idea, and I just want to say thank you for tagging that in.
Thank you. Any other questions? Then we can vote on that.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
That brings us to items for direction, and item 4.1 is a submission from Councillor Keabaga. If you want to go ahead and speak to this, Councillor, go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So basically, what we're looking to do with this motion is to direct staff to revise the policies around special events. And it was specifically because of this new festival we just had, which is Park Jam. And we thought that there could be some improvements on how the festival happened, and we were happy to work with the organizers to kind of go over that. And also, it requires us to review the policy. So we're going to be working with staff and the organizers to see how we can improve the next event when we talk about dates, hours, length of the events, and also making sure that there are no violations in the future.
Does Steph want to reply to that or anything, or, yeah, go ahead.
I just, through the chair, sorry, just some clarification as to what review with who and what we're reviewing, that's all.
Thank you. So I spoke to a member of your team in special events department, and we had talked about the number of complaints that we're getting, and it was very specific on the length of the event. This event takes place twice in 2 weeks. So there's 2 weekends in a row. And we're just trying to see whether that's working or not. Clearly, it hasn't it's gotten a very strong response from the community. And I can say this because we've had other festivals and I've never had such an issue or a high rise of complaints as we did for this one. So as I spoke to a member of your team, we talked about maybe working with the organizers to just see, because they're in standing, they were standing in, they didn't break any policy, basically. They can apply to do the events twice, 2 weekends in a row, because there's no policy that prevents them to do that. And I have spoken to the organizers as well, and they agreed that they would sit down to see how they can better improve this event. So when I spoke to staff, they basically asked me to move a motion to provide them the leg room to be able to revise with the organizers as well.
Through the chair, yes, I appreciate I talked to Mr. McGonigal and on our team, and there were certainly complaints. It's just trying to, and I appreciate the clarity, so it was just trying to get some clarity as to who we were working with, who we're reviewing, and if we're bringing a change in policy back to council, and just understanding that if we work and come up with something else, that it'll be a report back in order to change policy that's been set. So that's, if that's what we're being directed to do, then that's what we'll do.
Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, and I don't know if staff may want to comment on this as well. I wonder what my colleague, Councillor Kayabaga's thoughts might be in terms of what we're looking for here too, and I'm just trying to look for a little more clarity because I understand the 2 weekends in a row. It could have just as easily been 2 different festivals on consecutive weekends. I know that people said, oh, I could hear it for some distance. I will say, personally, I was out in my backyard Saturday night. I couldn't hear it because I had the noise of the Western Fair. That's part of the reality of living in the city. And when we have an event that's ending at 11, I don't think that that's an unreasonable cutoff time. I wonder if the complaints are, I'm trying to get a sense of whether the complaints are more about, these things run too long and too late, or is it they're too loud and they don't feel the noise bylaws being enforced. I'm trying to get a sense of what we're looking for here. Is it people feeling that we have too many events? Is it feeling that we have people have too much noise, that the noise level is too loud, that it goes too late? What are we looking for here?
So I do appreciate your question. It's actually a very clear question. Maybe I can be a little clearer on that. It could have been 2 different events on 2 different weekends, but it isn't. And we're all aware of that. And it is a public park at the end of the day. Having one person block the park twice, 2 weekends in a row for 4 days is something that maybe we could review. We could review on how long. This is where the policy review would come in to see who can have an event. Can we have an event twice, 2 weekends in a row, or can we not for 4 days in a row? And also the timing of the event was also crucial because this was the first week back to school in the city. This is in a residential area as well. The park is very connected to a lot of residency. And it was back to school. It was 4 days. On Thursdays, I wish you had my phone so you could pick up the calls that I was getting because parents were very concerned. And just reviewing a lot of the policies around what we do when violations become more than 1 or more than 2. And again, we did speak to the organizers and they're very they're not opposing this. They're happy to work with us because it's the first time that they do such an event and they're happy to take feedback from us. And we're happy to hear from them as well on what's working, what's not working. But that's where the policy review would come in. We need to see whether or not we're doing it right. The timing of the event, the length of the event, and how many times one person can book a park for a festival for 4 days.
So just a quick follow-up, and I appreciate certainly hearing that the organizers are being positive about working with this. So through you to staff, do we currently have any prohibitions or limits on the number of times an individual or an organization can get an event permit for our public parks or other public spaces in a calendar year? Or is it just open on a first come, first served basis. And I guess the part B to that is, did we have any other applications to use this space this weekend that we denied because it was already booked?
Through the chair, so we'll just use Harris Park since that's what we're talking about. There are 12 events allowed to happen, 12 event days that can happen there in the calendar year. We don't have a provision on whether it be the same event holder many times. Typically, that's not the case, that they're looking to hold all 12 events. This particular event holder held 2-day or 3-day events, forgive my memory, the past 3 years in Harris Park, which is coming up this next weekend. They'd held this event at Western Fair previously, the one that's currently there, although I think it's an extra day or two. So they moved it to Harris Park in front of this event. Part of that for them as an event holder was reasoning around setup time and costs and all of those types of things, so they could piggyback the neighboring events or the neighboring weekends. But they were within the 12 dates that are allowed in Harris Park. There were no other provisions that we could, from a policy standpoint, not allow the events to occur at this point in time.
Councillor Pelosa?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to staff, a couple of questions on my mind here. The first one being, were they found to be in violation of the bylaw on the first Thursday night being the 5th?
Through the chair, yes, they were. They were in violation of the sound policy for the special events bylaw. They'll be forfeiting or the deposit that's laid out in the policy.
Thank you. I'm glad that staff had followed up with that. I'm in Ward 12, so south of Old South, and you can't get much farther than where we're at. So Earl Nichols Arena area, you could hear the music, windows closed, in the shower, with the shower running, and could still sing with it. I recognize our, sorry for those graphic people. But my daughter also has autism. So when your daughter tells you it's a school night, please tell the neighbors to stop, and you go outside to realize it's not the new neighbors in the neighborhood or your current ones. And coming back to tell your child, I'm sorry, I can't make it stop, just another hour and a half, and you can go to sleep. Just put on your noise canceling music and everything else you can. It's difficult. I know that residents were still writing me on the Sunday. It wasn't as bad. I called in on the Sunday. I never campaigned on fun, so I'm okay with that. Though I do support events in the park. But my question is, when I called in, I was told by the gentleman answering the phone that we have enforcement to go out on Friday and Saturday nights, but not the Sunday, and he'd have to just simply send an email to his supervisor. Looking for some clarification of what happens on Sundays after having heard that.
So through the chair, we'll do a two-part here. Mr. Katolik will answer as well, but it's been a challenge. I just want to give a little bit of commentary. It's been a challenge for several years. It's been a challenge since Rock the Park and other events and probably before my time. So, and council has struggled with this issue for many years. So from the noise, the sound, where is the sound measured from? What do other festivals do? When is the end of the event? When is the beginning of the event? When does the sound check occur? When should the sound check occur? How long should the sound check be? And you know, I hear it as well, and it's interesting that you bring up Sunday, because I came in to work and said, wow, I think Sunday, even though, and I listened to the music before the event to see what type of music was happening on the Sunday night, and I thought the Sunday night music was extremely loud. It was the lowest decibels and didn't meet any of the 90 decibel readings that we had in the event. Now, the Thursday night was well over the decibel readings and was out of control, and the event holder, Thursday night, and the event holder corrected that, was within the decibels on the Friday night. Saturday went over again. Sunday didn't go over at all, and it's incredible the clarity in the sound and where you are on the location. And our events team went up to the new Azure building because It's a new residence and new people there that hadn't been living with the Harris Park concerts for many years. You couldn't hear the concert at Azure. But I was at Westbound on Saturday night at a backyard fire and could hear the concert on Saturday night, and I was close to the Bostwick Center. It's the way it travels, the way with the wind, it travels down the river, a clear night versus a non-clear night, where the wind's at. It's a big, big challenge, and I guess I just wanted to give the commentary that it's a big challenge for us, and it's a big challenge for council through the years, and a big challenge for residents. So it's the balance. We try and balance between a music city that we're trying to be, bringing the Junos, to respecting the neighbors and respecting the neighbors that are here all the time. And I think the challenge in trying to come up with a way to balance that has been a challenge for many years, and it'll continue to be a challenge. We're happy to review again. I think there's some good ideas that Councillor Kayabega and others have had. But it's still a challenge. So anyway, that's my commentary. I'm not sure I should give that, but I thought it was some good background there. Thanks.
Sorry, and was looking for someone to speak to the, okay, you're passing out the Sunday question?
Councillor Katolik.
Sorry. I got rambling.
So through the chair, on Friday nights and Saturday nights, you may remember that the previous council downloaded noise enforcement from the police to bylaw enforcement officers. So we have a team of 4 officers out every night from 7 p.m. till 3 a.m. And at this time of year, we're kept quite busy in the near campus neighborhoods. But what you'll find with these events that are going on in Harris Park is you'll have house parties in the afternoon because of a lot of the new students are going down to Harris Park to these events. So it's seen as, you know, in theory and in reality, in some cases, taking some of the noise out of the neighborhoods for house parties and having the new students that are living in near campus neighborhoods going downtown and to an entertainment area. Notwithstanding, this isn't going to solve all house parties, as we found out in near campus neighborhoods.
So do we have Sunday enforcement of these 4 people out through the chair to staff, please?
Sorry, through the chair. It's a combination of efforts. So with the special events, we have staff that are monitoring the decibel readings and taking decibel readings and talking to the sound board and talking with the event organizers. But from a larger bylaw enforcement issue, then that would go over to Mr. Katolik's team.
So through the chair, the complaint that came in Sunday at around 10 o'clock came to myself, another manager, and we immediately got back to dispatch and said it's got to go over to the concert. So it got transferred right away to the team at the event.
Sorry, through the chair, but they were not in violation on Sunday night with the decibel reading.
I was wondering which one of you was Bianca and which one was Serena on that one. Councillor Selly.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for my colleagues, and thank you to Downtown Council for raising this. I totally appreciate the perspective of the downtown residents and many of the people who raised these concerns. Historically, you may recall I was a councillor who moved that motion to have the police who were initially dealing with 5,000 noise complaints downloaded over to our bylaw enforcement officers. That was my motion. It was supported by council. So I recognize the importance of having the staff in place. I wanted more funds at the time, but wasn't able to get as far as I wanted with council of the day. That being said, I think the Friday, Saturday response that we have is great. And I think the response that bylaw officers are doing a phenomenal job. My first question to through the chair to Mr. Katolik is, could you let us know how many registered complaints we had for the first weekend of this particular festival, if possible, if you have that information?
Through the chair, I don't have that information today, but I could get it.
Sure, not a problem. So I could totally understand the need to want to review this. You know, my term on council, I think this has come up quite regularly, and hear very often from residents in the neighborhood, especially when I'm walking downtown, and they raise a lot of concerns. But I think the bylaws in place are there, and I think, the rules in place are sufficient enough to address some of the concerns that have been raised from across, some people in the city. I think it is a balance, and I think we did find a better balance than where we were in the past. I think of when I speak to, particularly this one festival, the 200 jobs for one night alone, and the economic opportunities for the restaurants, the bars, the hotels, the taxis, as is in the Uber drivers, and I know not everybody loves them today in the audience, but and the many other people in the industry who benefit from having this one extra day or 2 extra days. So I think what we then need to decide is if we want to scale back, which means reduction of hours for employment for people, hours of restaurants. The other point that I'm glad Mr. Katolik had mentioned is a point that we've discussed here around this horseshoe, and as well I've had conversation at the policing level, which is when you have festivals, you kind of take people away from the neighborhoods, as Mr. Katolik spoke of. And as you can see with what Western is trying to do with, I think it's called Purple Fest, they're trying to have a big concentrated event because then you can control that scene a little bit better. There's more resources. There's, because at the end of the day, it's the first couple of weeks of the year. Students and new people are going to come and they're going to have fun. And it's very hard to deploy resources, I'm sure, throughout the city in different places. So I think the balance is there. It's not economics over quality of life. I think there is a fine balance. This doesn't happen very often. This is something that, we have decided to be a music city, that we have decided to be a serious contender in a big city. And I think we need to continue to do this and head in this direction. So though I appreciate the letter from my councilor colleague, I don't support the intent. And I think the bylaw as it is sufficient for now.
Mr. Mayor, are you shaking your head or do you still want to speak?
No, I think my question was answered through Councillor Pelosa. Thank you.
Councillor Hillier.
Yes, through staff. I know we have a lot of festivals in Victoria Park from experience. We use sound abatement containers behind the stage. Has anything like that been used at Harris Park to try and contain the sound or redirect it?
So through the chair, we have started to try some sound mitigation techniques at Victoria Park. We're still working on the data and the impact of those mitigation measures. And if we get to a point where they seem to be a valuable mitigation measure, we most certainly would explore them at other properties.
Okay, Councillor Kabaga. Did you want to wrap up? Or I had a couple comments. I'm happy to. Okay, if committee doesn't mind, from the chair. So I wasn't inundated with complaints on this, but I have to be honest. I got a lot, more than I'm used to. We stopped receiving complaints about Rock the Park. Whether people have just accepted that or this was something different. Every single complaint that I received spoke about how loud it was. And also the timing. So perhaps people have accepted Rock the Park. They're used to it. They know when it's going to happen. I do know, and I have heard from people in the past that they often choose that time to go away, to go to a cottage or go visit friends or leave Dodge. But the fact that there are 2 Thursday nights then that this takes place?
Through the chair, that's correct.
So the timing that it's right after school starts again and it's 2 Thursday nights. I don't have a problem with back-to-back weekends. But the Thursday night and the Sunday night, those are the ones that cause me concern because summer's over. People expect to get back. It's still summer. My kids don't believe it's still summer. My kids are back at school. And so that's the only thing that concerns me is that the loudest night was the Thursday night and kids are trying to sleep, go back to school the next day. I know that we did a lot of work with the Rock the Park thing. I think we did a lot of work around that to try to make it to mitigate the problems for the people living in the area. I don't have a problem with the counselor asking for staff to review and to speak with the organizers, try to come to some kind of meeting point where it's not as bad for the neighborhood. I would support this, request from the counselor, but she wants to wrap up. Counselor Sully, did you want to go ahead?
Yeah, so I just want to clarify through you, there's no motion on the floor, so I just wanted to, before the person was wrapping up, I just want clarity on that, and then if there is a motion, I'd still want to speak to it.
Okay. We're a committee, so we can speak as much as, oh, yeah. Does anybody want to move the motion requested by the counselor? I'm happy to second it if someone on committee wants to move it. As chair, I can second it. If nobody wants to move it, then I have to leave the chair. But it would be only temporary. If I were to move this, would I have a second? So, Counselor, it doesn't look like anybody wants this review, even people that spoke with concern about the situation. I'm happy to let you speak one more time if you like.
Thank you. I just want to clarify that we're not doing this because we hate festivals. I'm a first-time counselor. This is the first time I'm in this position to see what it's like to receive these type of complaints. And I have to say, we've had a few festivals before this one, and my phone didn't ring. And my email was not full of complaints. But this time around it was. And it was because of the timing of this event, because it was twice with the same organizer, 2 weekends in a row. So we're gonna be expecting the same calls, the same complaints, the same thing for the next one. And that to me is an issue because the concerns that are being raised are to be heard. And it's my understanding that they were in violation twice, not just the Thursday, the Saturday as well. And we have spoken to the organizers. They recognize that this is the first time that they're doing a park jam. They want to continue doing it, but we can work around the length of the event, the timing of the event, whether they do it in September or not. And that's where the policy will come in and help us to review those dates, which they've agreed to work with us. So I would really ask committee to consider this. We're not saying we're gonna remove festivals. I went to Rock the Park. It was amazing. I had fun. Snoop Dogg was playing really loud, but I enjoyed listening to Snoop Dogg play really loud. All I'm saying is, this is a time where a lot of parents are trying to get back into routines with their children. It's in a residential area. And it was very difficult to deal with 4 days in a row, knowing that it's gonna happen again. And not only that, also dealing with the violations that were happening. So I'm not saying we're reviewing this policy to track back or to scale back. I'm just saying we want to work with the organizers because they are they're in right standing by doing this event 2 times in a row and for the length that they're doing it. But because they've also indicated they're happy to work with us to figure out a way to tailor their specific event, that's why we're doing this. We're not doing this so that we can cut out festivals or reduce how many days festivals can do things. We're just trying to see how we can move this conversation to be better for the next time. Like I said, it's my first time being a counselor. We've had festivals before. I didn't get complaints, and I'm being very honest. Everyone feels different ways about festivals and what happens in the city. This specific one, I've never seen anything like what I got. The complaints were just a lot. And it wasn't just complaining about the fact that they don't like music. People said we support festivals, but the timing of the event was not right. And the violations that were happening were also a huge concern. So once again.
So I have some committee members that want to speak. So I'm going to go to Councillor Lewis. Sure. Pardon me? It's my pleasure. Go ahead, Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and if His Worship chose to challenge the chair, I'd support you because we are at committee, so we can continue this for as long as we want. I just want to be clear through you to my colleagues, and I think both to Councillor Kayabega and to Councillor Pelosa. I'm glad to hear that the organizers are willing to work with us and change things. I just don't know that we need to address this through a full policy review as opposed to just having the complaints addressed. I mean, they've forfeited a deposit. It's in their interest to not be in violation of some things next year if they want to proceed with something new. So I think what we have is a situation where if there's an application made to continue this festival in the future, there has to be discussions around how do we address the problems that we had the year before. And I'm just not sure that we need a full policy review to do that, rather than just a discussion between city staff and the organizers, and probably yourself being at that table as well. But sometimes I think we can solve these these one-off problems with a particular event without having to change or go through a full policy review. So that's just where my head is on this, but I remain open to being convinced otherwise.
So to staff, what will happen next year, knowing the violations that took place? So they knew that they were in violation on the first Thursday night, and yet they still violated the decibel limit at least one more time that I'm aware of, based on what you've said, Mr. Stafford. So what would be the process going forward if they reapply?
Through the chair, if they follow the policy that exists and their event meets the 12 events that are currently at Harris Park, we would certainly talk to them. And we've worked with this organizer before around a variety of items, and you know, they're open to that type of discussion. The same thing being said, I can't guarantee that their event won't be applied for next Thursday next year and the Thursday after that. So I don't know what their intentions are. They would look at their business model and business plan. They are an event person that also runs a business here in the city that they have been good to deal with. And as Councillor Kayabega talks, they're willing and open to discuss some of the issues that happen. The issue that we have from preventing them at this point in time from having another event or holding an event on those days doesn't exist. So we wouldn't have that ability, but again, we would have the open conversation with them, and you know, if they're blatantly violating the special events policy that we have, we certainly have the ability to suggest that that's not the case. But this is their first event. They say they're willing to talk again. I think that's where we head with the conversation.
So follow up for that. Technically, they hosted 2 events. Is that correct? Was that how we would? So would they have given 2 deposits, one for each weekend, or did we consider both weekends combined one event?
Through the chair, I believe this is 2 separate events. They promoted and to the public and for ticket sales and those types of things as a one long event, which we had also talked to them about the fact that it's actually 2 events, not one, but that was their promotions team. So that was something that we also discussed before the events as well, because we had some concerns with people saying, is this a week-long event? When they talked about the number of days that they had. So we did indeed say that there's a break in the event there. So it is considered 2 events as far as our events go.
So in theory, they forfeited their deposit the very first Thursday night. They could have just ignored the decibel limit for the remainder of the thing, and there would be no additional repercussions for them. Is that correct?
Through the chair, once they violate and get out of the parameters of the special events policy, they are subject to noise bylaws as well at that point in time. So there are other opportunities as we go forward.
But there was no repercussion this time around. So they violated the noise bylaw on the Thursday. They forfeited their deposit. They violated it again on the Sunday. Were there any violations the following weekend?
Through the chair, the following weekend is coming. So this has yet to happen. It's a very fine balance as we talk about, and we've talked about it many times at council before. The danger, the risk involving police trying to pull a plug in the middle of a performance of a crowd of 10,000 people or 5,000 people or 500 people for that matter that are there to see the event is a challenging thing to put staff and police and public safety has been a concern. So it's an after the fact, it's dealing with the event holders after the fact is usually the way that's best handled as we've discussed.
So so knowing that, and I didn't know that before about that, I would be in, and I'm seeing where committee is, so I'm going to shut this down. But I just believe that there should be some sort of escalation of, so they forfeit their deposit, then they do it again. There should be some means for us to have some kind of escalation, because there is absolutely no impetus for them to follow the rules. Mr. Stafford.
Through the chair, it's been proposed in the past, and there have been escalated fines in the past. It's gone to escalated fines. It's gone back to the way it is now. It's been proposed to escalated fines and gone back to the policy that we have now. We've had those discussions. We do have opportunity and have had opportunity if there's a situation where we can have a bylaw officer at the soundboard to make sure that the soundboard is being handled properly. We do take regular readings. We do inform the soundboard at the time. It's challenging for our staff. It's challenging for all, as we see here tonight.
Counselor, one more time, and then I'm going to look for a mover to receive this report. And I'm going to give you a couple minutes.
Thank you for allowing me to speak again on this. So, like I said, there's a lot of loopholes in this policy, which is why we're reviewing it. My intent originally was to call staff and figure out a way to work something around Park Gym specifically, because that's the issue that we had at that moment. But I was told that we had to review the whole policy in order to respond to some of the questions and some of the problems that we're seeing with exactly what you just mentioned, forfeiting their deposit on the first day and still violating on a Saturday. And this is something that we were dealing with the whole weekend. I was dealing with it the whole entire weekend. And I'm not saying that, again, I'm just going to make it very clear, because at this point, maybe people fear that we're trying to change the policy to restrict festivals in the city. That's not the case. Our job is to review policies and to make sure that the policies are up to date and to constantly see what we've put in place, whether it's working or not. We need to review this policy. This policy needs a lot more answers. There's questions that residents were asking me that I had no answers for, like specifically on how did they get fined if they're violating, there's any violations basically, and how that works. And the answers I was providing were, I felt that were very loopholed, and which is why with staff, we decided to bring this back to committee and council so that we can be able to review and upgrade and basically update a policy. We're not removing the policy. We're not changing anything. We're going to talk about the changes that need to be made. I still have a specific issue on the Thursdays. I still have a specific issue on the Thursdays and on the fine, on the way we deal with the fines and the violations and all that stuff. So I think there's room for this policy to be reviewed.
So unfortunately, Counselor, it doesn't look like you're convincing anybody but me on this committee. So I'm looking for a mover to receive the Counselor's submission. Counselor Sally, seconded by Counselor Lewis. And we can vote on that. I do encourage you, Counselor, to continue to work with staff and work with the concert organizers to come to some kind of, yep.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Okay, and that was it, except for deferred matters list. So does anybody have anything on the deferred matters list that they would like to talk about? And if not, then I'm looking for a motion to receive that list. Councillor Sally, seconded by Councillor Hillier. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering if we could ask staff for the next cycle of this committee, if we could update item 7, which is the towing service review, so that it will reflect the requested expected reply date for a PPM in the Q4 or Q1 of 2019/2020.
Is that good? I'm seeing heads nodding. So with that, I think we can vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
And I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. Counselor Selly, seconded by Counselor Lewis. All in favor? Manual vote. I'm not seeing any opposed, so that motion carries. That was good. It's my son's